there's so much confusion, both moral and conceptual, around this issue. And yes, it's being amplified by people being emotionally hijacked. I mean, people just on the left here. I mean, the right has its own problems. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a fan of the right, but the pathology on the left is that when these topics trigger this emotional response, whether it's around sex, gender, wealth, power, I mean, all of these topics. But here we're talking about a group that's perceived to be an embattled minority, right? Muslims, which on the world stage they're not a minority. I mean, they're we're talking about 1.7 billion people, but we're talking about people who historically have several well-founded grievances against the West and the history of colonialism and recent misadventures in countries like Iraq, say. So it's easy to see how people are getting confused, but this natural confusion and natural moral concern and frankly with
the backdrop of what things Trump says around.
Oh yeah, but this predates Trump.
You don't live in this pristine bubble.
No, but the thing is, the confusion of the left is being cynically gamed by people who are actually none too closeted theocrats, genuine Islamists who are not committed to our values at all. I mean, they want to, a value like free speech, say, or equality between men and women, and they will use the moral scruples and political scruples of the left against itself, so as to, say, promote the hijab as a sign of female empowerment, right? So like the Women's March gets co-opted by people who, one of whom is wearing a hijab, who actually is a theocratic bully, not even behind closed doors, in any context where just the identity politics game gets played by, in this case, theocrats against everyone. But I mean, the left doesn't even know that they're useful idiots here. And when that's pointed out, you get a very negative reaction. But yeah, I think one of the things that I'm getting a lot of pain for now is my opposition to identity politics. I think that this idea that the end game for civilization is that we all get more and more identified with our subgroup, and then we have this, war of grievances, right? Or this grievance Olympics where you have, what trumps what. You're black, but you're also a lesbian, but you're not very tall. I mean, what variable can you stack on the others so as to be absolutely beyond reproach in espousing your political opinions? I think that if we are actually anywhere near moral and intellectual and therefore ultimately political bedrock, our views about how we should live and what we should do have to float free of identity. It's like it can't be true because I'm a white guy. It can't be true because you're gay. It has to be.
Although I have to say, it's not identity politics to understand why people come to things because of things that have happened to them.
Yeah,
right?
but then those people have to get over those things. So as to have a rational conversation.
For those who have felt somewhat unsafe, I think a lot, for example, we'll talk about this later about technology. I think some of the designs are made by people who never felt unsafe and never occurred to them different things, that they never occurred to them to change the way they're thinking. And so what you're asking of a lot of people who have put up with a lot of stuff to say, well, let it go. Let it go. They don't want to let it go.
Okay, well...
That's not identity. It's that...
Well, there's a time and place for everything, and so I wouldn't say let it go. I wouldn't have said it to African Americans, let it go in 1965, right? So it's like there was a moment for a civil rights movement that, was identity politics by some other name, right? But it was absolutely a moral necessity to react against this legacy of white oppression of black people. That's not a debatable point, but it is debatable whether black identity politics, as prosecuted by a group like, or a movement like Black Lives Matter now, is counterproductive or not. And again, these things are always counterproductive now when their critiques are not guided by reality, right? So if we're going to talk about police violence against innocent civilians, black or white, we have to be accurate about what's actually happening in the world. We can't lie about the statistics. We have to honestly engage with the data. And 15 cell phone videos is not the data, right? That's what is being used to spark a kind of moral panic around this. So whatever the data are, who got killed and when and why, right? We should want to understand that and then be motivated by whatever the facts are. These political movements, again, that I'm referring to as identity politics, are not showing a willingness to be constrained by facts. There are people who are activists who are pretending to be journalists, but they don't really have a journalistic bone in their bodies. They know what the answer has to be, and they will bend and ignore and ultimately even lie to get the ball into the end zone there. And so that's when you touch topics like this in the spirit of, well, let's just look at what the facts are. Mm-hmm. You get a lot of pain from people who think even thinking about facts in this space makes you a cold-hearted, privileged
and this comes
asshole.
as a shock to you.
Well, it's so toxic that it's dysfunctional. It's politically dysfunctional.
Well, it also leaves out who decides when's enough, who decides. I get your point. I think the journalist thing is some journalists. I don't think that's true of many, 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 many journalists. But that's a typical trope. It's like, oh, journalists are all trying to game the system. They're not. They're just not.
Well, it's not all. It's not. But
not most.
But it's many. It's more in some places than in others. It's also this takes us back to social media and just the internet. We have a lot of good, otherwise good people who are being moved
These good people's a phrase we can't use anymore. But go ahead, move along.
No, but people who are well-intentioned, but who are being moved by bad incentives, right? I mean, so that the business model, the clickbait business model of, we need to amplify the outrage here so as to get more eyeballs on our webpage. That is harming journalism across the board. I mean, it's harming the New York Times. The fact that, even the New York Times needed a hot take on the Covington High School thing that they had to walk back because they just had to be part of,
that was
the
minor.
click.
I'm sorry. I read. Speaking of facts, that was not a hot take. They were
wrong. I mean, it was like your hot take that you walked back.
And I walked it back.
Yeah,
but that's different. I don't cover Covington.
I praised you for walking it back.
Thank you. What they did was not even slightly what I did. They weren't even close to. I was completely stupid. That was theirs was
they
not.
Weren't quite as stupid. But
they weren't even close.
Well, but they had to.
I was stupider than the New York Times.
Yes. Well, all I'm saying is that everyone, if you're getting paid based on clicks, right? That is an incentive. That's one kind of incentive, and it's incentivizing. It's not incentivizing taking a lot of time to write a nuanced, not outrage-provoking take.